Glenn Frey's death came on the heels of the Eagles' 1994 comeback, totally shocking the music world. But behind the headlines, his wife blamed more than just bad luck. Glenn Frey wasn't just part of the Eagles, he was the engine behind their greatest hits. From crafting the laid-back groove of Take It Easy to shaping the haunting mystique of Hotel California, his fingerprints were everywhere, ultimately changing the face of rock and roll forever. But behind the soaring success, a storm brewed, and Frey's fall proved as dramatic as his rise. Glenn Frey was born in Detroit, Michigan, with Motor City music in his veins. Right from the time he entered the world in November of 1948, this future rock legend had wings to soar to unparalleled heights. Growing up in the sleepy suburb of Royal Oak, though, music was just one of his many unique interests. Before he ever strummed a guitar or sang a note in tune, Lil Frey had a laundry list of interests, and his life could have gone in any direction. He was an avid reader who might have become a writer. He was, despite his small stature, an athlete who might have pitched for the pros. He was, at his parents' behest, a piano virtuoso who might have performed in an orchestra. Interestingly enough, though, his unexpected future ultimately combined every single one of those early interests. One of Frey's earliest and most impactful influences wasn't even a musician. It was the writer Jack Kerouac. In fact, Frey was so crazy for Kerouac that he named one of his early high school bands, the Subterraneans, after Kerouac's 1958 novel. He also adopted James Dean's rebel without a cause attitude. In other words, he was a literary rocker. Unlike most of his peers at the time, Frey skipped right over folk music and fell into the Elvis-inspired rock and roll craze. But it wasn't exactly because of his musical preferences. At the age of 16, he cared about one thing and one thing only. Try and guess. Girls. And as far as he could see, girls cared about one thing and one thing only: rock stars. So despite all the grit and chaos becoming associated with the genre, he decided to become one. When Frey saw how people responded to the Beatles in 1964, he knew that he wanted to be just like them. So he ditched the piano, picked up a guitar, and started strumming. Soon enough, he was bouncing from band to band in Detroit, eventually ending up in a group called the Mushrooms. In his early days, Frey might not have been able to replicate Beatlemania, but that's not to say he didn't have his own fans. The Mushrooms became regulars on Swinging Time, Detroit's local teen dance show. With good hair, a leather jacket, and a wry grin, Frey was heading for stardom, or perhaps boredom. When Frey graduated from Dondero High in 1966, he dreamed of a life in music. But reality set in, and he promptly strummed and hummed his way into college. Suffice to say, his heart and head wasn't in the lecture hall. Frey spent most of his time chasing girls and partying. A chance encounter, however, would change everything. In 1967, Frey met another Detroit musician, the myth, the man, the legend, Bob Seger. Right away, the two sparked up a bromance that would reshape rock forever. Seger helped Frey get signed to Hideout Records and even produce his first single. It seemed like he had found his calling. Then his mother intervened. Had it not been for Frey's mother, Frey might have never founded the Eagles. Just as Frey prepared to join Seger's band, his mom caught him smoking with the Music Man. Given that he was still in his late teens, his mother put her foot down and forbade him from joining. Turns out, Mama knows best. When Frey turned 19, he was free to follow his own path. Without a parent stopping him, he rejoined Seger and played acoustic guitar and sang backups on Seger's Ramblin' Gamblin' Man. The single was a hit and gave Frey his first taste of rock glory, and he wanted more. Acting on Seger's advice, Frey began writing his own music. That's when everything changed. Throughout his teenage years, Frey had been dating Joan Slywin, a fellow musician who would go on to form the girl group Honey Limited. But when Slywin broke it off and moved to Los Angeles, Frey thought he'd try to win her back and followed her there. However, instead of fighting Slywin, he found something even better. Frey's West Coast gamble paid off, just not in the way he expected. While his romance with Slywin fizzled, his real love story was just getting started. In California, he met John David Souther, a fellow Detroit native who happened to be dating Slywin's sister. The two bonded over music and heartbreak, and the rest became history. Frey and Souther didn't miss a beat. They immediately formed a duo and before long had a publishing deal. Unfortunately, they weren't exactly rock stars. Their deal only paid a grand total of $90 a week, which they split. Between rent, food, and trying to look cool, it was barely enough to survive. But while the struggle was real, so was the sound. For a time, Frey lived upstairs from none other than Jackson Browne. Listening through the floorboards, Frey would hear Browne's songwriting process in real time, and it changed everything. For Frey, it was like going to musical grad school without the tuition or the student loans. Success, however, still eluded him. Frey and Souther perfected their sound, but their publishing deal took them nowhere. So they ditched and made the Troubadour, the famous nightclub, their unofficial home base. The iconic venue was crawling with future legends, and Frey was about to become one of them. In 1970, everything changed for Frey. Through his record label Almost Records, he met Don Henley, a musical meet-cute for the ages. No one knew it yet, but these two would go on to dominate the airwaves and smash records. But first, they needed a full band. Around the time that Frey met Henley, Linda Ronstadt, the eclectic and enigmatic singer, just so happened to be in the market for a backing band. Desperate for a guitarist, her manager hired Frey and assembled one of the most transformative rock bands in history. He also recruited Henley, Randy Meisner, and Bernie Leadon for the tour. If those names sound familiar, they should. After performing just one gig with Ronstadt, Frey and Henley had a brilliant idea. Why not keep the band going? Alongside Meisner and Leadon, they performed the first iteration of the Eagles. With a little country, a little rock, and a lot of ambition, they had all the makings of a supergroup. The only thing missing was a manager. Given that they had only ever played one gig as a backing band for another musician, no one had ever heard of the Eagles. But that didn't stop Frey from making a bold move. Without so much as an invitation, Frey and his Eagles bandmates auditioned for the all-powerful media executive, David Geffen. Seeing their raw potential, Geffen signed them immediately. The Eagles were officially ready to fly, but they still needed to jump the nest. Frey knew he had something with the Eagles, he just didn't know what that something was. So, before they hit the big time, the Eagles retreated to Colorado to write, jam, and figure out who they were. With music producer Glyn Johns behind them, they locked in their sound and got ready to soar. With their new sound, the Eagles released their debut single, Take It Easy. Funny enough, Frey did everything but take it easy. In addition to singing the lead vocals, he had collaborated with Jackson Browne to write the lyrics, infusing the song with his literary flair. But when the single soared to number 12 on the charts, it was very clear. Frey had rewritten rock music. He was just getting started. Despite a successful debut, Frey wasn't content to coast. The Eagles' first album earned praise from music critics and remained near the top of the charts for weeks. But Frey and Henley were already eyeing the next big thing, and it wasn't just another round of country-tinged radio hits. With a commercially successful album under his belt, Frey and his Eagles bandmates decided that it was time to get back to the drawing board. What they produced next, however, was not something the music world had seen or heard. Their follow-up album, Desperado, was a concept album that pushed the limits of country and rock. The only question was, had they pushed the limits too far? Frey and Henley had teamed up to write Desperado, their bold new album's daring title track. Though they never released it as a single, the song quickly became a favorite amongst Eagles fans. However, behind the scenes, not everyone was on board with the experimental sound that Frey was giving to the Eagles. Initially, Frey's ambitious concept didn't sit well with all his bandmates. Bernie Leadon and Randy Meisner admitted that Frey's new direction for the band had caught them off guard. However, once they saw how Eagles fans reacted, they had to relent. Frey was onto something, but the sales didn't show it. Despite its popularity amongst Eagles fans, Desperado didn't even come close to the top of the charts, staying well outside of the top 40. However, the band didn't blame Frey for the album's relatively weak performance. Instead, they pointed the finger at the record label, where business considerations had overshadowed artistic ones. But don't fret, Redemption was just one hit single away. Between the Eagles' first and second albums, Frey leveled up and the world took note. Singing had never been truly his forte, however he was determined to change that. Frey put in the hours and made his vocals soar. By the time the band's third album, On the Border, came out, Frey had a heavier rock and roll sound and the album broke into the top 20 in the charts. However, a rift was forming behind the scenes. Even though the Eagles flocked together, there was no question the band belonged to Frey and Henley. Naturally, it wouldn't be long before cliques within the band began to form, particularly after Don Felder joined. Serious changes were coming. Just as birds change their feathers, the Eagles were changing their band members. Despite the band's growing success, they just couldn't keep it together. Seemingly feeling as though the band had become Frey, Henley, and the other guys, Lydon stepped down after the release of one of these nights. Shortly after that, Meisner followed, with Frey and Henley picking their replacements. Still, the Eagles were more popular than ever. Hotel California is arguably the Eagles' most enduring hit, and it was almost all Frey's idea. Frey later revealed that in writing and composing the song, he had a cinematic vision. A weary traveler stumbling into a strange desert hotel. A weird world full of freaky characters. Frey's haunting lyrics tell of a traveler caught in a disturbing web from which he may never escape. According to Frey, Hotel California was more movie than music. He revealed that he envisioned the song opening like an episode of The Twilight Zone. Just as his chilling lyrics suggest, he pictured a character who could never escape their unreality. "We wanted to write a song just like it was a movie," he explained. It got stranger from there. As the years rolled by, Frey revealed more and more about the perplexing, haunting, and mysterious Hotel California. In describing the cinematic montage that inspired his song, he said, "We decided to create something strange, just to see if we could do it." However, this last burst of creative freedom might have drained the entire band. With hit after hit, the Eagles quickly became one of the best-selling rock groups in history. From sold-out stadiums to endless radio plays and chart-topping albums, every member of the band was rolling in dough. However, Frey couldn't maintain these soaring heights. In a stunning move, Frey and Henley decided to disband the Eagles. It was a curious move. Years later, Frey revealed the reason for his and Henley's decision to land the Eagles and break up the band. In an interview, he gave a two-word reason: Hotel California. He confessed that he and his bandmates felt too much pressure to come up with another classic like their haunting rock narrative. But without a band, it wasn't clear what he'd do next. With the Eagles broken up, Frey wasted no time launching a solo career. In 1982, he released his debut solo album, No Fun Allowed. Unlike the title suggested, Frey had more than a lot of fun with his out-loud sound. Hits like I Found Somebody and The One You Love cracked the top 40 and proved Frey didn't need a flock to fly high. In fact, he was about to go stratospheric. In 1984, Frey made another bold sound choice. This time, he teamed up with the synth wizard, Harold Faltermeyer, to deliver The Heat Is On, the blazing theme song for Beverly Hills Cop. With Eddie Murphy chasing bad guys on screen and Frey shredding on the radio, the track became a worldwide hit. It also opened up a whole new world for Frey. Frey's success with The Heat Is On landed him in an unexpected second act as an actor. After releasing Smuggler's Blues, the moody single inspired an entire Miami Vice episode. The song was so popular that it actually landed Frey a guest starring role on the show, making him the rare type of eagle who could fly and swim. That said, he was definitely better on radio than TV. With a few screen credits to his name, Frey caught the acting bug and made several more TV appearances, including a surprisingly solid guest arc on Wise Guy. But when he started his own show, South of Sunset, it flopped harder than a stage dive on concrete. The pilot premiered to abysmal ratings, forcing the network to cancel it after just one episode. His attention may have been elsewhere. In 1983, just as he was learning to fly solo as a musician, Frey was pairing up in his personal life. The former Eagles frontman tied the knot with Janie Beggs, a Texas-born artist. But much like his show, if you blinked, you missed it. The couple separated in 1988, sharing few, if any, details about their marriage. Fortunately, he'd learned to love again. In 1990, Frey married Cindy Milliken, a dancer and choreographer whose rhythm matched his beat. Cindy wasn't a groupie, she was a creative in her own right. And Frey wasn't just a legend, Frey was also a devoted husband and father. No one can deny that this marriage was the real deal. Frey and Milliken built a solid, lasting marriage. They stayed together for over 25 years, and Frey kept things pretty grounded for a man whose job was rock and roll. Cindy wasn't just along for the ride, she was his partner through the highs and especially the lows yet to come. The two stayed together for the rest of his life and had 3 children, Taylor, Deacon, and Otis. In fact, Frey's son Deacon would also have a short stint as an Eagle after Frey passed on.
For exclusive perks like early access to new videos, priority replies to your comments, and to have your say on future content, consider becoming a Factinate member. On top of that, your support helps keep the channel going. Click the link in the description for more details.
Looking ahead, after Frey passed away in 2016, no one knew what would come next for the Eagles. I mean, he wasn't just a founding member. As history has shown us, he was the Eagles in many ways. But in 2016, the band surprised everyone. Instead of closing the curtain, they brought Deacon into the spotlight. At just 24 years old, he joined the Eagles on tour, carrying his father's torch. Deacon became an essential part of the lineup, touring for years alongside legends like Don Henley and Joe Walsh. Frey helped the Eagles jump from the nest, and his son Deacon helped them keep flying after tragedy. But going back to the 90s, getting the band back together turned out to be a priority for Frey. In 1994, after over a decade apart, Frey finally gave the people what they wanted, a reunion. The Eagles got back together to release a new album, Hell Freezes Over, and embark on the ambitious Hell Freezes Over tour. The album was actually something of an inside joke. When asked in an interview about the band's decision to reunite, Frey had the perfect answer at the ready. He explained that previously, whenever people asked when the band would get back together, the Eagles liked to say, "when hell freezes over." Naming the album and the tour after their cheeky response was, as Frey put it, a pretty good joke. It was so good, they turned it into a multi-million-dollar comeback. Over the years, Eagles fans and detractors alike had speculated on the reasons for the band's breakup, but once they got back together, Frey was quick to set the record straight. People have the misconception that we were fighting a lot. It is not true, he insisted. We had a lot more fun than I think people realize. At the Eagles' first show back in 1994, Frey took the opportunity to dispel any rumors about Eagles infighting for good. He looked out at the crowd and declared, "For the record, we never broke up. We just took a 14-year vacation." By that time, however, he was no longer a young rock star. In the early 2000s, Frey began to battle with health issues. When his doctors diagnosed him with rheumatoid arthritis, he knew his prospects weren't great. Worse yet, the meds he took helped his joints, but hit his guts, triggering colitis and pneumonia. Sadly, his condition worsened at the time. In 2015, just as the Eagles were about to receive an honor at the Kennedy Center, Frey hit another setback. On the advice of his doctors, the Eagles postponed their appearance so Frey could undergo surgery. It was supposed to be a pit stop on the road to recovery, but things turned bad. Instead of having surgery and quickly getting back on the road, complications from pneumonia caused doctors to put Frey in a medically induced coma. His family and bandmates were left in limbo, waiting for a recovery that would never come. Rheumatoid arthritis, colitis, and pneumonia. A brutal trio. According to medical experts, the very medication that Frey was using to treat his conditions may have compromised his immune system. Then, in mid-January of 2016, Frey took his final flight and landed in the hereafter. The rock legend was just 67 years old. This tragedy might seem clear-cut, but some people suspected foul play. While the entire world mourned the loss of a beloved Eagle, Frey's family lost a husband and a father. Frey and Milliken had been married for decades, a true partnership that not only stood the test of time, but also the chaos of the rock world. Their bond was strong, their life was built on more than just fame, so it's no wonder that his death caused tension for Milliken. She believed more could have been done for her husband. In 2018, Frey's widow filed a lawsuit against the hospital and doctor who had treated Frey, claiming that they had been negligent in treating him. The loss was personal, painful, and public. But no lawsuit or scandal could erase what Frey had given to the music world and to his family. His talent still echoes, but not only through the music, but through the family and love he left behind. With platinum records, chart-topping singles, stadium-rattling concerts, and to boot, a bronze statue in his honor, Frey could have allowed his ego to soar as high as his career. However, in spite of his wild success, he still managed to stay grounded. "As long as I keep taking out the garbage and cleaning up after the dogs," he said, "I'll have perspective." If you enjoyed this Factinate video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. Want to say in who we cover next? Join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks.